Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. Tried to get this framed up and ready to go over the last few weeks through Micah, our coordinator, my wife. And I'm so pleased to have him here today. Abubakar Salim. Am I saying that right?
Man, that was perfect.
Yeah,
that was great. No,
yeah,
that was good, man. That was great, man.
All right, I appreciate that. It's really great to have you here. You're a pretty famous dude. I watched Game of Thrones, but I didn't watch House of the Dragon, or I haven't watched it yet. I've decided I'm going to just...
bro.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, you're just saying you're missing out, man.
I like to let my stuff stack for some seasons, even until things are over. Yeah. But it's hard to do sometimes, you know. But I was reading about you, like you're also in some. I love period pieces. So you were in the Napoleon film recently,
right? Yeah,
which is dope. I still have to see that. And then the show Jamestown.
Oh man, Jamestown.
I got to check that out. You know?
It's good. You know what? It's good, man. Like it's funny. It's one of those shows where when you watch the trailer for the first season, you're like, oh man, this is dark as hell. And then you're watching it and you're like, oh, this is pretty nice, pretty light. It's funny, man. Like it was a good role though. I had a good fun. I made a lot of really good friends on there. Ben Starr, sure. I mean, I was working with Ben for a very long time, but like I've known him for a while. But like that was where we worked together professionally for the first time, which was great. And it's been that was a funny job. Sorry, you've just taken me back, bro.
No, it's all good. That's what Wikipedia is all about when I look at these filmographies, because I'm not much of a TV and film guy.
Fair enough.
So I like to see, I'm like, I've heard of all these things. And then of course people wouldn't know you best from Assassin's Creed Origins. And I was telling you before we started recording that I was watching a BAFTA interview with you from that. You played Bayek in that. And so people would know you from that as well. So, but the reason I wanted to have you on was because you are the lead of Surgeon Studios, the studio that put out earlier this year via EA Originals, the Tales of Kenzera Zhao, a game I really loved.
Thank you.
And I'm a big Metroidvania fan. And so I loved playing it from that perspective too, but also from the storytelling perspective, the character perspective. And it was this that attracted me to reach out to you, because I put out video clips of our podcast just to kind of, do a little farming on Twitter and see if we can gather some new listeners and viewers. And I put out that I was really impressed by this game, and that I had just kind of assumed something about it that wasn't true going into it, based on the narrative that was developing not only around it, but around other games as well. And you had responded to that. So I'm like, let's reach out. And so we got together through that. And so I thank you for taking the time to talk to me today about this.
No, but thank you for giving the game a shot, man. Like, I think like that's, there's a lot of games out there, right? And I think like that's also, something that we're all, wrestling with time. So I appreciate the fact that you've given time to the game and that it was an enjoyable experience. So I like, thank you truly for that, man. Like I really, it means a lot, because we put a lot of passion into that, which is nice to kind of, to see it kind of have that positive outcome on it,
Yeah, I totally hear that. I like to try to buy, and my audience knows I do this, I try to buy games when they come out at full price just to show support for them. I like my Metroidvania, so I did buy your game immediately. It was very appropriately priced, which I want, even more than appropriately priced, so I want to talk about that in a little while. But I bought it because I was like, yeah, Metroidvania, I'll play this at some point. But then as time had gone on, I guess it came out late April. I didn't play it till July or August, I want to say. And through that time, all the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff started. Yeah. Studios started, kind of that were associated with them started, either closing down or laying people off or whatever. It was just this whole hullabaloo.
Yeah.
And I felt bad for your game in particular, I have to be honest, because I feel like it didn't deserve any. I mean, I don't think most products deserve that kind of scorn, but it didn't deserve that level of vitriol aimed at it. And I'm sad that I let it just kind of subconsciously alter my own presupposition about what the game would even be.
It happens, man. Like, I think, like, look, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that always happens. You hear like a terrible film review, right? Or like someone says something about a film or even a TV show, like, I didn't really like it. It has an effect. Like, it does paint something, right? So I kind of like, I don't necessarily, blame you for that. The thing is, though, is like, I think the difference is, right, is that you were like, you know what? I'm actually going to give it a shot and see what I think about it, right? And like that step there is something that I think is what separates the sort of like the person who kind of just trusts the voice of whatever and just kind of leaves it whatever, or the person who actually is like, you know what, I'm actually going to investigate it myself and see what's in this. And like I respect that, I rate that, because I think, you know, we're in a time at the moment where, and I don't know whether it's because of the amount of information that we're receiving, that we just have to almost make these kind of very quick split decisions of being like, all right, cool, you know what, if it's in there, I trust that person's voice, I'm just going to go with that, I'm just going to go with the flow and believe that, which is a shame, because you end up missing quite a lot of stuff, be it either experiences or either in a game or even just in real life, man. Like it's one of those ones where, yeah, it was a storm, bro. Like when you know the game came out and all this stuff with Sweet Baby and whether it's woke and all this sort of stuff started coming out, it was like it was just wild, man. Like, because again, and I think I've been like really reflecting upon it even myself just now, and I've said this before, like the game the game and how it's actually performed, not only just on like, you know, and I'm not just saying just Steam, but like on other consoles, on PS and all this sort of stuff, like it's done pretty well, like for an indie game, for a first game coming out like off the bat, like it's done pretty well. But and I'm in the driving seat, I can see whether we're doing good or not, right? But then you have a story outside that's telling you different, and it's like, oh man, is that right? Is that wrong? And it was very weird, man. Like it was such a weird experience. You know, it wasn't just as pure as just releasing a game and it being kind of judged on the material of what's in it.
Right.
It was being judged simply on face value, which feels like, wait, what? You know? Yeah.
It feels profoundly unfair considering my own experience with it, and I think others as well. It's funny you bring this up because I was doing a lot of research about you and reading some old interviews, and you told, actually a recent interview you did with Uprocks. You said never made a game before, first time running a studio. Okay, that's a good hit. And I think for a while, even though we're in the seat and seeing the numbers, we're seeing the facts, we were almost made to feel like it wasn't, end quote. And that's like a really powerful thing, because even the dialogue around this game to this day is poor sales, no one cared, but that's not even true either.
It's true, man. Like, and look, and this is the thing, like I remember saying this so much. I've wanted to share the details, to share everything, but there are so many contractual obligations that you have to adhere to in this business that you have to listen to. And what is it, just for me to then prove to someone who doesn't actually know the facts the truth? Like it's weird. And so like I'm doing this dance of like, you know, my ego or my pride almost wants me to, and my like that justice side wants me to show you the numbers, show you what we're doing, show you where we're at. But that will come at the cost of professional relationships, which, you know, it essentially puts food on the table for other people in the studio. So it's like it's that, and the other crazy thing is like, why am I having to do this dance? You know what I mean? Like it's like I just wanted to make a game that essentially expressed you know, my grieving journey and my process and put it in an art form. It's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to compare sale numbers and see how woke and political my game is. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't do it for that reason. So it's it was a very surreal thing to be on the receiving end of that front, right? And as I've said, like I've been going through this whole process of like, because I even, you know, I did like a video essentially expressing like, you know, how we've been, you know, about the racist elements of what's been coming at us, you know, behind the scenes, and being very vocal about it. And even then I've realized, and I look back at it and I'm a bit like, bro, man, like what? Like, why do I have to do this? Do you know what I mean? Why do I have to fight this for a game that essentially isn't about that? It's just about a young boy grieving.
That's right. And I think in the same video, I think we're talking about the same video, you called the feedback, quote unquote, or the vitriol, quote unquote, unnecessary and inauthentic, which felt true. Because I don't know how much you know about me and my shows or whatever, and I don't expect you to know anything, but we talk often about what we would call diversity for diversity's sake, and that there are certain things that I think do deserve to get the piss knocked out of them a little bit over. I love the memes with the, like, personally, like the Netflix, like it'll be like a fake Netflix poster, say like George Washington, but it's like a black guy, right? Like I think that's funny,
Right. Okay.
like, and I've said before, like an example of James Bond would be a good example where it's like, we don't need a black James Bond. We have a James Bond. We need a black, or we could have a black world trotting, his own 007 or a different character, right?
So
Yeah.
And that's the thing. No, and like,
right.
look, and I agree with you. I think like
Right.
there is, if you're gonna make James Bond black for the sake and like make that a thing, what's the point? Like
Right.
it doesn't like, because again, I'm a believer of as well, and I've said this before, like it's good, like diversity in the sense of like seeing yourself represented in any shape or form is cool, right? And like it's great. It's like, and I remember as growing up, like not seeing many black faces on screen, or if they were playing specific characters, and it kind of made me think of, oh, this is the only kind of stuff that we are always seen as. Like there's nuance to it, right? But Black James
Mhm.
Bond is a good one, right? In the sense of like, yeah, I don't want to see a film where you got Black James Bond and the first thing he mentions is like, yeah, man, it's because I'm black. Like, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, I don't want to see that. Like, it should just be the fact that he is, and it just goes on that story. Or, as you say, like, create an original story or
Right.
create something different, and that has been done many, many times before. And I think like even in elements of, and this is it. This is why I mean, like, it's so nuanced, dude. Like, there is a sense of trying to enforce something or do something, and you can feel like it's inauthentic, but at the same time, there is a need for other stories. For example, my game, right? It's the only reason, and this is kind of what I've been sort of talking about with it. Like, yes, it's set in Africa or like a fictional Africa. It's exploring Swahili. It's exploring that culture. It's simply because it's from my perspective. And it's from what I have been exposed to and what I've grown up with, right? And it's because I was given the chance to essentially have my story heard. And that's what happens. But if you're going to, I didn't necessarily like go up to EA and be like, look, you know what's going to make lots of money? Africans. Like, I don't
Right.
like, you know what I mean? Like it ain't, and I think that's where it comes from, right? It's like, it's very, there's a nuance to it, there's a balance to it, and I think it's that sense of, yeah, you don't want a black James Bond if they're just going to talk about the color of their skin, because what does that do to serve Bond and his journey?
Right.
It shouldn't matter, really.
I totally agree, and the Bond thing is just an example, and I think you're saying the same thing in that. Just, he's a character, he exists, so show the respect to everyone involved, including the potential new black protagonist, of just making something fresh and new. See, this is what I loved about the game was, and you told Kotaku this in an interview, you said, quote, "My pitch wasn't layered or colored in the idea of just trying to be a black story. It is at its heart a human story," which I think was key. But at the same time, I'm telling the story from my perspective, and I happen to be a black and African. So like that makes perfect sense to me, and this is what bothered me about going into the game and quickly realizing, like, you expect to get bombarded by like some message from some pink-haired person in Silicon Valley or something like that. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but you're not. It was instantaneously obvious. It's like, I don't like the term woke. I don't use that term, but there's nothing woke in quotes in this game. There's nothing weird at all. It literally is just a really heartfelt story, and that's why I was so enamored with it. I ended up getting the platinum trophy in it. I really enjoyed it, and
nice.
And yeah, I'm so glad we were able to connect, because I wanted to at least. I know you've put up with so much abuse. I watched your video from May, and I think you did a follow-up video as well, and it really bummed me out, and I took that in context with the game that I just experienced. Yeah, as I told my audience, yes, there are no white people in it. It's like, it's a story in Africa about a black family and the experience through that perspective. This is exactly what we want, because to the James Bond example, it's fresh, it's new. There's no expectation. It's something created out of whole cloth. So it is what it is from that perspective, like you said, and it's valuable to everyone. It's not about the color. That's why I said blatantly in my video, I'm like, it comes off as racist. Like,
right.
when and I try to be sensitive to that because it's like, yeah, there are multiple examples of things that fit within the category of DEI or things that are getting shoved down your throat. There's no doubt about that. I'm not a denier of that at all. But there are many things that are categorized like that don't belong in there. And this was one of those things. It was just a story.
I think
Yeah.
and that's it. It's a human like story, and this is something that that's all I've been wanting to tell, man. It's like a human story. Like I can't change, or and I don't want to. I shouldn't have to, and I shouldn't want to, change it. But like I can't change how I came into this world. Neither can I change the perspectives and the elements and the things that have kind of hit me and made me who I am. The thing is, it's like ultimately at the end of the day, all I can do is try and tell a story that if you were to move that story into a Norse space or a Greek space or
Mhm.
whatever space you put it in, at its heart, at its core, it's about grief and it's about that journey of it. Be it either, again, like a young sort of shaman or sage goes on a journey with Hades or anything like that. It's ultimately it's just, again, it's because it's from my perspective, from the stories that my dad told me when I was growing up, from the stuff that I was, again, kind of influenced by, is where it comes from. And I think like that's kind of where I've entered it into. It then just turned into this thing of, no, they're trying to like force black stories on us, or like they're trying to shove a message, and it's like, tell me that message, that I'm
Right.
trying to push onto you, because even I want to know, like, what is it that you've got from this that feels political or feels like it's that it's against your values. I would like to know, because ultimately, because I don't know, I'm genuinely just here telling a story about a kid just trying to get over the loss of his father, which is kind of the journey that, again, which is close to my kind of feeling as well as many other people's feelings. Now, obviously, we can like go into the whole like, oh, the business practices, or like the whole like affiliation with Sweet Baby and whatnot. And I have answered them. Like I've
Mhm.
even spoken to them. But even then, even by talking about that, you realize that it just won't appease. It's like I can be as bare and as open as I can, and it still won't satisfy, because then it becomes there's something else underneath the hood of what is kind of cooking. And I think that's what I mean by, like, there is a difference with the fact that you had your idea or your image of the game, of what it was, because of what you heard and what you've been experienced to, which is, you can't help that. That's what happens. But the fact that you were like, you know what, actually, I'm going to give it a try and see what it is. Now, if you sat with me here and said, you know what, I gave the game a try and I didn't like it, but I didn't see anything like woke about it, that's also totally valid. That's totally cool, bro. Like, that's fine. It's like, all right, great. What didn't you like about it? Let me improve upon them on our next iteration or our next thing, right? That's something also that we've been trying to do. But that's a different conversation to, nah, man, just ain't gonna try it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just yeah, I agree. It's a shame because, and I hope I've turned some of our audience onto the game by talking about it pretty extensively. And I know that some people have played it in our audience for sure. But yeah, it's as you said, you can't even find the woke messaging or the political messaging. It doesn't exist in the game. It just doesn't. I told my audience straight up, I'm like, it just doesn't exist. Now, I wanted to ask you this specifically because it's about the pain over your it's inspired by your father and the loss of
Yeah.
your father and all that. I imagine that the outcome, though positive from a game perspective, and most people that played it loved it and all of the rest, but it must have compounded that pain a little bit to not. It becomes about something else and it
Yeah.
becomes trivialized. I mean, that must have been
I kind
relevant to
of
you.
yeah, I kind of knew, like, as soon as and then it's funny, I even mentioned this in the video, like, as soon as I confront this, as soon as I mention this, it will trivialize the actual message and the meaning of behind what I wanted to kind of do with this game. But the feeling of being silent about it almost felt as well disingenuous. Like, if I didn't say anything about it, if I just like took it on the chin and kind of moved on, um, I don't know, man. It just felt like it it's this whole thing of I have to say something, because because people are hurting. It's not just me, right? It's many other people, and I think like that's, and then this, this story and this narrative around us is being taken over, like when actually, I'm the voice to talk about this stuff, right? I'm the one to say essentially like whether we're a success or not. Like that's me, the one who's in the seat, and there's no agenda here. There's nothing to be said there. I'm just going to tell you the facts. So it felt like I needed to say something. But yeah, you're right. There was a moment, even with that video, of thinking just before even posting it, and even talking to like the people close to me, being like, look, as soon as I post this, man, the narrative's going to change, and it's the meaning of loss and grief is going to kind of be a bit diluted. But I felt like I had to say something.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that completely. Let me ask you this, because I have so many notes here. I've been, like I said, I've been listening to some of the things you said,
Yeah,
watched some of your interviews. Um, do you think it's better to fight back against this kind of stuff or to kind of ignore it? Because
that's
I've
a good
long had
question.
this. I worked at IGN for many years as a senior editor a long time ago, and at the beginning of GamerGate is around when I left. And I remember giving the original GamerGate in 2014, I guess that was. And I remember giving the advice of being like, why don't we just not say anything and not fight back and not feed into it?
Mm.
They didn't listen to this. Obviously, it became this self-fulfilling thing. Do you think that there's any wisdom in not confronting these problems, or do you think that we should put our shoulders into them, give these people oxygen, or pretend
Oh
that they don't
man,
exist?
it's oh man, bro, it's so, again, it's so crazy because again, like my journey through it was ignore it to begin with. Uh, then it was say something and fight it, and not even fight it. It's talk about it, discuss, listen. Let me hear your point of view. Let me hear what you're saying, like truly, and let's really dissect it. Let's actually listen to one another and have a conversation. But then you realize that there are parties out there who almost have built their identity on hate, for example, or on an agenda or on a force. And by building that identity, to question that, it's never going to change. And it's not and look, it then becomes about it's funny, it's one of those ones where as soon as I start seeing it get like really personal on like Twitter, when people are like calling each other slurs, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what's
Mm,
that got to do with the discussion here? Like, it doesn't do anything. And it for some reason it always goes into that. It always goes into to name calling. And so yeah, in my eyes, it's like I still am an advocate for conversation, for actually talking about it in the right forum. It
mm,
just needs to be in the right forum. And I think, like, for example, like this, having a discussion, like, and actually talking about this stuff, it's important because people then can hear a perspective, they hear a voice, there's a human connection there, right? um Me like reading an article, or even seeing a post, it almost inflames the situation because it's removed from the context of it all. But sadly, we're in a world where that's the only platform or the only space that your voice can be heard, and I think that's an issue. So like, yeah, so
yeah.
it's one of those ones where, like, I've tried confronting it, I've tried being silent about it, and I don't know the answer. All I know though is like, there are people out there who react to conversation and who react to, I still believe that people can be changed and moved and listened to, and kind of adhered to. Like, you got to give people a chance. You got to hear from their perspective. Like, don't get me wrong, like, again, I come from a very African family, right? Very African kind of, there's some people with very African ideals, very sort of ways of, of thinking and approaching things. For example, emotions. The idea of even emoting, or even like as a man, is like the
Mm,
worst thing you could do. Like, who are you? You are supposed to stick up, do your thing, and deliver what you need to do. And by me literally, even like when my father passed away, that was the thing. It was like, don't feel sad. You're the man of the house now. You got to live up. And that hurt, man. Like, there was a lot going on. Now, by simply voicing that and also trying to tell people as well, like, and it's funny actually with this game, that's the one thing that I've realized, that like a real big positive, was even through this game and having like certain family members play it, or even hear the interviews or whatever, they're like, I didn't know that you were hurting that much, but I see where you're coming from. I see where you're I can see you. And that's because they listened. And I think like that's the thing. So this is why I'm like, yeah, I don't even think it's about fighting. I think it's about just having a discussion. Because then you're able to tell like whether someone is being genuine or not, whether they're coming from a genuine place or not. Like whether they are, like I know that people are throwing this word grifting around on like Twitter, right?
I'm called a grifter
And
all the time. I don't even know what I'm grifting for.
and I'm like, and what this is it? I'm like, okay, what does like even like I'm like, what does it mean? You mean like they're just like spreading hate for the sake of money? And you can kind of see some people who do that, but it's almost thrown around like woke. It's like
Right.
now you're just losing. Now you're just making it a derogatory term instead of actually really thinking about what you're actually saying here. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, totally.
I think there is a discussion that needs to be had. I just don't. And I think it isn't about fighting it. It's about discussing with the right parties on it. If it comes to a genuine place. But
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing is it's difficult. Like even like I take our Steam page for example. So for a long time, uh, we let it do its thing. We let Steam users post whatever they wanted to post because there were parties out there who were actually, be it either fighting a corner or essentially calling people out on their crap, right? And being like, buddy, you haven't even played the game and you're saying all these things about this
Mm.
game and about this and whatever. We let the discussion go on, but then it gets to a point where it becomes abuse, like not even abuse, but like spamming for the sake of spamming. That's not useful. And but for a while, I was like, you know what, just let it happen because they're exposing themselves. It got to a point where I was like, this is just not nice. Like you're in my house and you're shitting all over the
Mhm.
place, and I'm just letting you do it because I'm like, well, it's just showing who you are. Like, get out of here, man. Ban it
Yep.
and cut it out. And it's like, and I think like that's where that action takes into consideration. But then you do see moments of healthy discussion on these forums where you're able to be like, oh yeah, actually, someone's point of view is changed, either be it for the game or against the game. Like, someone might be like, oh yeah, love the game and all the platforming, the X, Y, and Z. They're like, oh, well, if you like this, you should see Prince of Persia's platforming because Prince of Persia's platforming is like dope. And they're like, oh yeah, actually, it's actually really, really good. That's healthy, right? I'm not going to turn around and be like, you're selling another game. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Of course.
so yeah, I know I'm rambling a bit
No,
because it's
please.
it's it's funny, man. It's like you've really caught me at the stage where the lead up and the build up to the game. Building a studio in itself was like a feat in its own, right? That was crazy. The marketing of the game was another thing. Launching the game was emotional. The aftermath, something else. And like I'm now coming into this phase of like, oh, okay, where am I now? Where are we now? And it's funny. It's a good time to catch me because I am kind of in this space of like trying to figure out as well, like what is the right way of doing this stuff?
Yeah, I think it all. It's really interesting to hear you say this because I think it all exists on some sort of razor's edge where each situation is going to be different. It's going to require a different response. Sometimes ignoring and rising above, as it were, is the right
Yeah.
choice. Sometimes putting people in their place, in some sense, is right too. I noticed this a lot with Concord recently with another PlayStation game or a PlayStation game that obviously bombed and has already gone away. But just like if you don't nip something in the bud or feel like you don't get in on the conversation from a ground level, it's hard to unravel it. It almost becomes the truth. And so by letting it fester, you're risking a
This is
lot.
the thing. This
Yeah.
is the thing. And this is why I was very much and like you look, we still haven't posted numbers. I've hinted towards it, but I just and like we haven't been able to. But it's because the narrative was being, you're pulling information from like Steam DB or whatever, and it's like you're letting that dictate to you what the narrative is. And it's like when it isn't as clear cut as that, and
Hmm.
I think like and you're right, if there is a silence, it's almost like you're almost admitting it, you know weirdly we're in this space of like, yeah, if you're silent, it's the truth, this is the narrative and this is the truth. And but even now as well, like sometimes where I found, even by saying something, you can be denied. And it's that whole thing of like, what is the right and wrong way? I mean, like again, we don't know, we don't truly understand or know Concord's story. We have no idea. Like
Right.
we have our assumptions and our ideas on it, right? And from what we've seen, and you know, I again from my perspective and from what I've seen, has either been the news has either been from Twitter or it's been from, you know, from again from other kind of articles and news articles and whatnot, and and honestly, there's been it's had that weird effect, and I'm ashamed to admit it, where there's been so much fire on it, like so much kind of madness on it, you almost don't want to touch it. Do you know what I mean? You almost are
Yep.
like, let me stay away from this. But you know, then you hear from people that, you know, I do respect and do rate, who are like, actually the gameplay's solid. It's really good. It's technically really, really good.
It
It
is.
plays really well. It's clean, right? And you're just like, and that to me as a developer, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or even as a gamer, I'm like, that's good. That's what I should be loving. You know what I mean? And what I should be running for. But yeah, man, it's such a weird time we're at the moment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it feels like some sort of breaking point with a lot of people, a lot of things, not just in games, but just everything, especially here
Yeah.
in the United States with politics and I don't know, grievance and it's just a lot of anger. I see it taken out on. I mean, I've been in the games industry for a really long time. In a front facing way. So people take things out on me all the time, are always mean to
Right.
me. I always find it. I mean, I don't want anyone to get death threats, but when people like are like tweet like I got a death threat, I'm like, dude, people threaten to kill me all the time. I mean, it's like, um, you know, there's something really toxic and horrifying about it, but you almost get used to it. But then you think about how sad it is that you get used to it and how you actually
That's it.
deserve better. Yeah.
That's it. Like you know, I remember having this conversation with someone who was like, uh, it was just another guy in like a pub or an event, and we were just, you know, we were talking about, let's talk about the fact that I've got this game studio and all this sort of stuff, and then I said something,
Mm,
you know, I decided to say something and everything, and the first thing they turned around was, which was like, well, why didn't you just, you know, stay quiet and just kind of grim and bear it and know, you know, you know your truth, you know what's going on, and I'm like, yeah, I would have done that in the past, and I probably would have been comfortable with that. And isn't that sad? Like I'm okay with being, you know, being being told like, you know, oh, this, what's this monkey making this game for? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm cool with that. It's like I shouldn't be. You know what I
right.
mean? In a sense, I should be like, hey, hang on, that's not cool. That's like, watch what you're saying. You
Yeah.
know, and the other thing as well, it's like you hear this a lot as well. It's like, oh, these people won't say it to your face, and it's like, sure, but you're reading it. You know what I mean? Like
Sure. It's
it,
easy for people to say that when I've said this to my audience before, and because you're much more famous than I am in multiple spaces. It's easy for someone who frankly will never get that kind of vitriol thrown at them because they're just nothing wrong with it. Just a person going through their lives, a regular person, regular job, anonymous. So they
mm,
don't have to ever really experience the idea of it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to kind of deal with that. It's just on the internet. It's like, dude, no one's heaping this stuff on you. So it's
yeah,
easy for you to say from
it's
your
easy for you
perspective.
to say. And also,
Yeah.
look, and don't get me wrong, like it's, you know, there's all this idea of like, oh, it's the internet, grow a thick skin. And don't get me wrong, there is an
Mhm.
element of that, right? It's the
Sure.
same thing as like being at school. You know, you've got to grow a thick skin, like to a degree. I grew a thick skin growing up, right? But still a bit shit. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And you have every right to say that it sucks. And I think like that's the thing. And that goes back into essentially, as I was saying, like the emotional element of this game and the impact it had even on my family. My father passing away sucks. I'm allowed to say that.
Mm.
But beforehand it felt like I wasn't allowed to. And I should just grim and bear it. And isn't that sad? You know what I mean?
Right. It
Like,
is sad. And I think God, it's like there's such a sense of irony in it because your dad came from Africa, right? You guys
yep.
settled in the UK. So you're being imbued with kind of I guess maybe more of an African standard of masculinity and
Hmm.
family and all these things. And it conflicts with the British more Western, modern, feel your feelings kind of shit that is probably surrounds you and certainly does here in the United States. And how that in and of itself comes out with interesting outcomes. Like you're not even allowed to exist in the space between and explore it without having to choose a side, take a
Yep.
stance, do all those kinds
Yep.
of things. And I just find that distressing personally.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of like, again, it's, I think you said it there, it's like picking a side. Like the one thing that I realized as well with a lot of the language that was used even when the game was out was pick a side. You know, you're on the other side, or the other side are treating us like this. And I'm like, And I'm literally like, I have no idea what side this is or like
Right.
whose side wears on. Like, I don't see sides here. I'm just seeing you as who you are in this exact moment. Talk to me like a human being. Like, forget about this side stuff. Forget about all
Mhm.
this other stuff. Like, just talk to me as, like, talk to me now as a human. And for some reason, like, it just didn't register. And like, don't get me wrong, you can't do it over like 270 characters. Like, you can't.
No.
But I think the intention is there, and I think like the aim is there, and I think, yeah, man, it's very surreal. It's very surreal. I think, and especially as you say, like there is this weird irony of being caught in between like these cultural differences, and that's kind of also what I wanted to even explore in the game.
Mhm.
The idea that you've got this young kid in a world, in the Afrofuturist sort of world, who is in their feelings and who does admit their feelings, and then you've got Zhao, the young shaman, in the sort of like the mystical area, who is in his feelings, but his objective is, no, I'm going to defy this and go for it. You know what I mean? And that's
Right.
sort of something that I wanted to highlight and flag in it. But he gets lost. He gets lost in the noise.
Yeah, it's bad, dude. I recently told my audience, it might have been over the video I sent out actually, or the video I put up about this game, but people do expect you to like kind of stick a flag in the ground and say something, and when you don't, or when you don't conform to what they want from you, then they really show themselves. I'm married to a black woman, and someone called my marriage a DEI marriage a few weeks ago because of this. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, meanwhile, she agrees with a lot of the things that I feel or whatever. It's like, you
Right.
can't. And I was like, I was upset for her
Oh, that's
kind of, but I was
amazing.
also like, what are we doing? Like, why is it being reduced like this? Now, who
Yeah.
I'm married to matters about how I interpret these sorts of things. And then I have to kind of come down on your side or this other side. And
Yeah.
I'm just kind of tired of the cycle. And I
It's
felt like,
tired, man.
yeah,
There's so many like, hoops and barriers that we've just got to jump through, that we've created for ourselves. And it's like, hang on, what? And that's why I'm very much of the mentality of like, every story that I tell or that I want to tell or that I have, I'm able to kind of be in or have some form of control in. It's about humanity. It's about being human. Like, I think that to me is exciting. Like, if you were to strip everything away, race, gender, all this stuff, like, what is it at its core that you are trying to say to me? And those are the stories that I'm interested in. Like, and that's again what we tried with Zhao. It's the sense of like, if you were to strip everything away, what is it really about? It's about a kid who just wants to bring his dad back.
right. Yeah. It's about loss and
Yeah.
rediscovery and being careful what you ask for. And
Yeah.
a lot of, so I totally agree. I'm curious. In one of the interviews I read with you, you were talking about how lucky you felt to be with EA,
Yeah.
and that, people really do covet EA original status, which they do. I mean, and even some of the games that don't sell on EA originals, like I really loved Immortals of Avium, for instance. I thought that game was awesome, and people just didn't care about it.
Yeah.
And then there's Wild Hearts, and there's Unravel, and all these kinds of things. And your game fits, I think, squarely within the culture of EA originals.
Mm.
What did they think about all this? They must have some advice for you or media training or something. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, again, they think it's silly noise, right? And like, I think like the individuals, the people in it, were all like, it's silly noise. And this is what I mean by like, it becomes this. There is so much going on, right? You've got to think as a business, as a corporation, taking a stance on this or saying something about it. Like, who are you to say that? Who are you to represent, for example, a whole company, right? It's like,
mhm,
that shouldn't be that should, and quite rightly so. You shouldn't like, my voice shouldn't represent the whole of Surgeon Studios, or it shouldn't represent the whole of EA. It might do at times, or people might see it that way, and I think it's different with me because Surgeon is my company. But like, it's, they were all against the idea of it and didn't like it, and they didn't, it was sad, man. Like, it's sad, but like, again, it's like, what can you do in those scenarios? What can you really, what action can you take truly? And the only action and one of the actions essentially that we did take was like, which, even looking looking back at it, I remember thinking to myself, even doing this is gonna look bad, but you know what? Like, fuck it, we're in it, we're doing it. Was reducing the price of Zao. Was being
right,
like, look, this, games are for everyone. We're not making this game specifically just for like the modern audience, as people are saying, right? This game is for everyone. Like, it's for everyone who's experienced grief, or either be it losing a parent, or even a pet, or even a, whatever it is. Like, the point is that this is for everyone. So we'll lower the bar of entry. We'll lower, essentially, we'll do something that doesn't necessarily, do well for the business, but what it is the one factor that we have control over. Even then, it was seen as like it was like a bad
Right,
move.
because then they're going to be like, "Oh, you're using this as a PR beat to hide that you need to drop the price of
Yeah,
the game."
man.
Yeah, I
And
know.
it's
It's
like,
very predictable.
it's like I don't know what to do. And
Yeah,
so they, the thing about EA that I really truly rate and respect about them, and especially the team that I was working with, is that they gave me the license and the creative freedom to do what I wanted to do, right? To kind of explore this game, explore this area, and whatever. And what's funny is, it's like, when I remember when pitching the game, because I'd only pitched to like a few publishers, because I didn't even know that you had to pitch to a publisher, right? I
right.
just came in with the idea of like, I'm just going to make this game and see what happens, because I wanted to make a game. But I remember pitching to one publisher, and they came back with an email saying essentially like, "Oh, this game is very niche. It's like of a niche audience, of a niche sort of like story, and it's because it was African mythology." And in my head, my answer was like, "Hang on, that's just like that's like a nice little factor. Like, that's just my perspective. This story is about everyone here has experienced grief, and it's a Metroidvania, which is a very overpopulated,
Right.
genre. Like, that ain't niche, my man. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
I
it,
agree. In fact, I would think that like there's a great advantage, because I was thinking I've been playing games like you for many, many years, decades,
right,
and
right,
I can't think of any game like that's thematically similar to this, actually,
right,
that I've ever played. So in fact, it's a major differentiator. I see in a different world, like a parallel string theory universe, everyone would have seen this game as something truly different,
right.
which it is. I mean, even from a Metroidvania standard, I remember talking about it in my conversation, being like that you start with like a dash, that you start with the
Yep,
double
the double
jump.
jump. Yep,
Like there are things that can break the conventions. It's not gruelingly difficult. I personally think it's better than the Prince of Persia game that came out earlier this year, which I also think
thank you.
was a great game,
Yeah,
made for a much higher budget. I think I liked how the game it wasn't quite as backtracky. The map
no,
was really, and the
yeah,
interface was really interesting. I liked the enemy diversity because it felt realistic. It didn't feel like I love Symphony of the Night and stuff like that, but like, why are there 8,000 enemy types, right? Like you don't,
I
it
don't, I
doesn't
don't
necessarily,
understand the pattern.
yeah,
Like, I'm
right.
just like, yeah,
And everything just seems to be getting interestingly harder and harder the deeper I go into it. And so I thought that there was a lot of really interesting stuff about the game. And I wish people saw the differentiation of, yes, this is like an Afrofuturist kind of place, a story
Mm,
about loss, characters you've never seen before. And it's not that people don't like different cultures and all those kinds of things. It's funny, man. Sucker Punch got away with making a game all about Japanese people from the state of
I
Washington
know,
with
man.
mostly a
Yeah,
white staff. No one
yeah,
really seemed to, only a few people really seem to care about that. That's why it's hard for me to not see this as racist. And that's, some people took issue with that because they don't like that word. But, and I think a lot of things that are described as racist aren't truly,
right,
but I think
right,
that sometimes you're not going to slip one by the goalie. Like it kind of is what it is. Right. And
right.
but I think underneath all of that, it really kind of showed people's asses and stopped them from playing a really good game.
And this is
Yeah.
it, right? You kind of like think like, okay, you're refusing to either like broaden your horizon, or just see a different perspective, or just try something different or something new. Like, and look, that's totally with you. It's like, a lot of people were like, I don't have a problem with people turning around and saying vote with your wallet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, or
Hmm.
like
Of
whatever. Like,
course.
I have no problem. You don't want to buy something? That's totally cool. That's totally fine. Like, my issue isn't with that. My issue is with the ignorance. Is with the is and it's with the choice of not engaging in a on a like an or giving someone else a chance in the same way that you would expect someone else to give you a chance to hear you out, right?
Hmm.
And I think like that's the thing. It just felt very much like, oh, okay, this story, it's with X. You're doing this story with X. Like, I mean, a lot of this like stuff was with. I remember there was a lot of flack about Denuvo. It wasn't even that much, right? That we had Denuvo one, right? And that's
Right.
again contractually, like that's the thing that we're doing with EA. That's what it is. And besides, you know, it's a way of pirate protection. But people took almost offense to the fact that as this small game has the nouveau cutting its audience, and it's like, wait, what? And just recently, you know, doing my own digging and looking into it and everything, I, you know, politely asked, like, hey guys, can we just remove the nouveau? And everyone's like, oh, they've removed the nouveau because of it's a money thing. And it's like, bro, I can't win. Like, it's like, so
Nope,
yeah, you're
you really
right.
can't.
It's really one of those ones where can't slip part like one past the goalie. I like that saying because it's true. You just admit like that's what you are. Like just say it because that's what I'm seeing and that's what I'm hearing. Prove me wrong. Do prove me wrong, please.
Right.
Because at the moment, that's all I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would agree. It's like, I do think that the vaunted so-called modern audience, I do think things are made for them and that they do crash and burn because there's no authenticity there. Again, I just think that things unfairly get caught in the crosshair, and this is
I mean,
one of them.
I got to actually. That's a question. Like, what is it? What is the modern audience?
Well, this is something we always talk about. Is like,
right,
especially from an American, excuse me, an American-centric point of view. Although I think the UK is very similar in Australia and kind of some of the other English-speaking places. Is like an eye towards like LGBTQ. You know,
right,
lots of what people I guess would interpret as like femininity or androgyny and weird things like that. Things that I think that you can see a lot of in Concord or whatever. And just as the
right,
most recent example, and I'm like, yeah, there does seem to be another game. I don't want to beat the shit out of these games, but it's like that game Dustborn that came out, that Quantic Dream published recently. It's like, that's a modern audience game in quotes for sure.
right,
Like, and it crashed and burned. Like no one cared about it. I just think, so I do think there are companies chasing that stuff. It's like, how can we get the most diversity? We got to get women playing games. We got to, you know, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool if you want to chase those markets. Sometimes it comes off as a little transparent. Again, I just hate when things get caught in that crossfire, like
right.
that don't belong there. And then people will say like, oh no, but black people are in it, you know? And I'm like, but what do you say? Or like, you know, the other thing I said, and people didn't really like this, and I do want to talk to you about Sweet Baby Inc. a little bit, is because I don't really know very much about them, to be honest, is I was like, just a basic logic problem. Like I was a freshman in college taking freshman logic, right? If you
Right.
have a game and you say it's inspired or it's been kind of infested by Sweet Baby Inc. and progressivism and all that, right? And then I play the game. I'm a conservative, right? And I tell you there's none of that in there, right? And then you think that, you know, the next step of the logic is you think I'm telling the truth. Then what does that even say about Sweet Baby Inc.? Maybe it's not as bad as you think, you know?
don't even go there, mate.
No, because it's like, I'm sure that some of those people hate me and all that, and that's totally fine. And maybe they do weird shit in other games. I'm not really even sure what they're doing in games specifically. I own a game studio too, not as big as yours. We make indie 8 and 16-bit games.
Right.
So we don't have the money to even consult with anyone. I have no idea how that goes, but I've consulted for other companies in the past, and
right.
and I know how that goes. But I was like, doesn't this even, if there's nothing like that in the game, they worked on the game, you trust me, I come from a different political alignment than many of them, then doesn't that question your presupposition about Sweet Baby Inc.? But people don't even want to.
They don't want to go there.
No.
Because again, it's questioning the identity and the story and the narrative of their stance. And it's you're questioning them. And it's offensive. Like, how dare you? Why are you questioning where I stand? And I think like that's sort of where we're at the moment. It's like it feels like I can't question, or I can't, a challenge, or even want to engage in that, right? And this is the thing. It's like, I'm sure, and I've said this so many times, man. It's like, I don't like, we're in a world where everyone has differing opinions, points of view. Like, me and my mum see things differently. Doesn't mean that I hate her. Doesn't mean that I don't trust anything of her opinion. If she recommends a TV show to me and I like watch a trailer, I should make a judgment as to whether I should give it. It doesn't mean that I have to watch it, but it also doesn't mean that I should just pew it because my mother's of a different, generation. But we're in this space of like, oh yeah, I saw like even recently, like, if you follow X, and X, your opinion is invalid. Or if you have like pronouns in your bio, it's invalid. I'm like, you're making a judgment on that? Like, let me make a judgment on your character, on on the things you say. And don't get me wrong, like, I think there have been things that have been said that aren't cool. And I truly stand by it. You know what I mean? Like in the sense of like, yeah, it's not cool to for example, um, as I say, like call people names or be derogatory to to a certain certain types of people. That's not cool. But I'm not going to judge you because you got he him in your in your picture. I'm bigger than that. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. Yeah, especially because I know so many people that have to do that at work, and they just do it because they have to. You don't even know who's doing it to go
Oh
along, get along.
man,
Like you don't
yeah.
even know. You're making
You
like
don't
a
even
series of
know.
assumptions. You know, like,
That's
and who
it. And
cares really?
who cares? Like it doesn't. It's not killing anyone. Like it's not hurting anyone. And I think like that's the thing. As long as it's not like this is the other thing as well. It's like if there is a difference between sort of hating someone because they have he him in their pronoun and hating someone because of the color of their skin, right? And it's like there's such a big difference there in regards to the fact that like a lot of people who have, and again you can say this with anything, but truly like a lot of people who have there has been a lot of people who have like the last words that they have been a derogatory comment, and you're just throwing it out there like as if it's nothing, and we've been on the receiving end of that. That's what I have a problem with.
Mhm.
I have a problem with that. Like my problem again, as I say, like my problem isn't the fact that you are voting with your wallet. Like, do that, please. Like, and or your opinion on the game. I didn't, the controls are sticky. Okay, cool. That's your opinion. I don't have a problem with that. That's totally cool. We can try and find a way to amend that. I cannot change the color of my skin or who the characters are based on or where they're coming from. I can't change that because that's just what it is. But yeah, yeah. Anyway, it's funny. Like I do think like there is this. I think that the thing that is really truly missing right now is that dialogue, is that kind of conversation between these differing opinions in a setting that isn't there to just invoke hatred or invoke problems. Do you know what I mean? Or to
Totally.
kind of or to kind of spark something new or different or something. It feels like everything has to have an agenda, and like sometimes maybe there isn't one. Sometimes you can just agree to disagree. Do you know what I mean? And that's totally cool.
Yep.
And find the things that you do agree on. You know, but
Dude, agreeing to disagree is life. You know, I mean, I
yeah,
like my own family is like half
it's a
Trump people,
relationship.
half Democrats. It's like I
Yeah,
don't know.
right.
You know, I don't know. I don't. It's like
Totally.
yeah, and when
It's the
everyone loves
same.
each
Yeah,
other, we get along. It's like it's okay. You know,
same
and
with my family,
yeah,
man. And it's totally cool. We still breaking bread over the table. Like it's, you know what I mean. But it doesn't necessarily, and again, as I say, like there are some, obviously there are some moments where it does get to a point where it does start getting personal and it starts getting very different, but that is then a different kettle of fish. That's like a different
mm,
beast. And I think like, but I think there is this weird blurring of that, of where it's almost like, because I don't agree with your idea or your point of view, you're the enemy.
it sucks. You know, it's
No.
I don't like that either because I just feel like there's so much more humanity in people than people give each other credit for.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think everyone's generally going towards the same thing: happiness, security, family, whatever the case might be, contentness. And I think we focus too much on the extraneous, outliers, on one hand, like focus too much on the racism, on all those things that maybe doesn't exist everywhere you see it. But on the other hand, pretending that things don't exist where they clearly exist, which is
Mm.
like I think the case with your game and why a lot of people were surprised by my take on it. I'm like, no, it's got to be we have to call balls and strikes, as it were. And so what about the Sweet Baby Ink thing? Do you feel like this? I mean, I assume you feel like this is overblown. I've
Yeah,
reached out to them actually. I
it's
can get in touch with them.
it's
I don't think they want to talk to me, but
it's no,
yeah,
it's stupid, man. Like it's one of those ones where again, it's it's kind of snowballed into this thing that has become, and this is just my opinion on it, or like it's just snowballed into this thing that I feel, um, it's hate for the sake of hating, in the sense of like, you know, what's the best way of kind of talking about it? So, for example, like the work they did on our game, right?
mm,
I've never written a game before, and I've never, made a game. So who do I go to? I go to the people that I know, and they consulted on it. I had tons of other friends and people in regards to kind of reviewing the game and playing it, feeling it, giving me their opinion on story and whatnot. And that's what it is. And we have a choice as to whether we want to put it in or not, right? That's it, right? And yeah, I just I don't know, man. I just don't necessarily. I don't get the hate. I still can't understand the hate for it. I just, yeah, it just doesn't. Every time I've tried to look at it, like, okay, fine, right, stupid shit was said online, right,
Mm,
of people in the past, and people say stupid shit online all the time, and yeah, it's stupid. It's idiotic. Don't why as if I keep thinking of like what what I think it was like Will Smith said about his kid about saying like, yeah, they're gonna say stupid shit online and that's on there forever. Like we've been saying that stuff like beforehand in the
right,
past, and it's like we can kind of get away with it, right?
right,
But
exactly.
like, but I think like it's stupid, and you've kind of set yourself up for that in a way, and it's what it is. But again, like my in my mind, it's like, and I didn't really dig into it too much because it was, again, it just felt like noise, and it was almost to the point of like, okay, cool, that's that, but what has that got to do with with Zhao? Is that, like, I'm trying to bridge this connection now. If people are gonna refuse on because of a certain sort of stance of an individual, and they're going to refuse buying a product because of that, okay, maybe check yourself on all the other products that you have in your house. Maybe check yourself on your iPhone or whatever phone that you have, or like the systems that you buy from. Like, there is, things aren't as black and white as you think it is, right? Everything's a bit gray, and I'm not
Mm,
necessarily advocating for like child labor or any of that
right,
stuff. I'm not saying that, man. Like, all I'm saying is it's like, know, really come in, like, know where you're coming from right now. Are you gonna you're gonna wash, for example, like Zao or any other game that they've worked on with this same brush and color without actually even trying the game? Then that comes from a place of ignorance. And that means like you should probably look at everything else. Like, oh yeah, the lithium in this was, crafted in whatever X. I shouldn't, I should, that's my stance. I'm never gonna buy a phone again. It's like, that ain't you, bro. Be
right,
real. Like,
right.
so I think, yeah, it's this whole Sweet Baby stuff was just, it just became noise. Like, it got to a point where it was, again, as I say, identities were crafted and formed from the hate of it, from the anger of it. And it was like, we stick with this. This is who we are. This is my flag. Bam! And that's who I am. And I'm happy with this. And this is me feeling like I've got an identity, a voice now. It's like, okay, but I you really want to die on that hill?
Yeah, it's strange too. I wonder. That's what I was asking you too earlier about. It's kind of related to, do you fight back? Do you not? Do you ignore? Do you kind of lean in? It's like, I actually think people leaning in on that company, I don't know people there, I don't know what they're working on, but I imagine that's had a major material impact on their ability to continue,
Yeah, I mean, and look, again, I don't want to speak for them. Like, this isn't,
Right.
I don't really know much, but like, I'll be honest, man. And this is there is a brutality to the business. And I'm sure you know this, right? You've seen it, you've in it, you know it. There is also a brutality to a business where it almost doesn't even have an impact. Sometimes it can even actually have the complete opposite
Mm,
impact. You know, there is a reason why there's a saying like, bad press sometimes can be good press, because then you start getting eyes on it, and there is that element of it too. And this is why it's like, I again, I don't know the ins and outs of it all, but the thing is, we just don't know. It could have had a negative material, impact on them for sure,
mm,
but it also could have probably put a lot of people in regards to being like, actually, no, this is fucking stupid. I'm gonna support them and help them where we can. We just don't know, and that's the thing. But I feel like, I mean, and again, I can only speak from our perspective of what we've received on the whole Zal front. Like, I don't know what has been written in regards to like how it could have, like, it maybe, like, let's say the Sweet Baby stuff didn't even happen, or any of this racism stuff didn't even happen, and whatever the performance of it, like, I don't know whether that would have affected or shifted or changed the performance of it as a whole. You just don't know. What I can, what I do know, however, is that being on the receiving end of vitriol and hate and anger, that wasn't nice.
yeah,
you know,
I bet.
that's what I do know. And that's what I can talk on, and that's what I can share. So yeah, man, it's, look, don't get me wrong. Like, I have twisted in my head so many times, like, oh man, has this affected this? Has this affected that? Like, has it really done this? Has it really done that? And I have recently just come to the conclusion of, you just have no idea. What I do know, however, in my heart is it has really sort of exposed, as you say, it's shown a lot of people's asses. Like it's shown people, a lot of people for who they are and where they come from and what they kind of stand on and what that actually means.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think right. It's forcing people to. I was forced to confront my own assumptions about Sweet Baby, like I said, based on
Mm.
my experience with Zhao. I'm surprised, and I say this to my audience all the time, the idea of steel manning things, where it's like, if you disagree with something, you should come up with the best possible argument for the thing you disagree with. That way
Yeah.
you can learn to like circumvent it, go through it, destroy
Hmm.
it. And if you can't do that, then you're running away from reality. And that was kind of how I felt after playing the game and bringing all of these different things in, that came to bear. I was like, well, there's only one logical outcome, and it's that this isn't what it's being purported to be. And if you
Hmm.
can't say that, then why would anyone else believe anything you say?
Right.
It almost felt like I had to confront it, because it wasn't. We didn't talk about it one way or the other. We get a little cultural on our show, but not really. And so like it's not. We're not one of these people that talks about other people and makes videos about other people. We talk about games and the games industry. But when things are germane to that, like this situation, it slowly seeps in, and you just, again, what I said at the top, I'm like, I felt bad. Just not that I said anything about the game negative, because I didn't, but just in my own mind where I'm like, oh, it's sitting on my cross media bar on PlayStation, and I'm like,
Right.
I'll get to that eventually. But really, if I knew more about it, I would have put my shoulder into it and gotten to it a lot sooner. That's why
Mm.
it felt so important to talk about it, not only from being a good Metroidvania, but just more of a cultural product. And how I really believe that we should want new and different experiences. And I don't necessarily think that always means it's like, uh, all women cast or all, minority cast. It's like whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be that. It could just be thematic with all white people if that's what makes you comfortable. But to
Mm.
me, I'm just like, I play this and I'm like, damn, I never played a game like this before. And
Right.
that's unusual. It's how I felt when I played Journey. It's how I felt when I played Gone Home. It's how I felt when I played a bunch of these different games where I'm like,
Yeah.
certainly there's nothing like this. And isn't this what we want? I've been playing games since the 80s. I'm certainly looking for different
It's new
fare. Yeah.
experiences. It's new. It's new. New perspectives, new ideas, new things that kind of inspire. Like again, it's the difference between the games of when I was playing as a kid to the games I'm playing now are vastly different. You want that. I don't want to play side scrollers all my life. Like I want more.
Mhm.
So I think like I totally, get that, and I totally feel that, and I think that's the thing. It's one of those ones where, like, where does it come to a point? I mean, actually, here's a question. Actually, have you played Dustborn yet? I haven't,
No,
so I
I've
don't
not
know.
played it. I've watched some videos, but I've not played it. No.
Okay, so would you play it?
Yeah, I think if there wasn't so much on my plate, I've thought about that.
Yeah,
It's like it's almost a game that demands you play it to understand it.
I
It
kind of
looks.
get it, right?
I must say though, I must admit, it looks pretty. Like what I've seen, I'm like, ugh.
I
But
mean,
you'll never
right?
know
Okay,
until you play it.
you never know until you play it, right?
Right.
And like I, same thing. Seen a lot of it. The whole, like, I think one of the attacks is like cancel someone or
Mhm.
bully someone. I don't know, but like, and when you take it out of context, you're like, huh? And then you also, but then again, there was another person who posted like, didn't like Rockstar make a game called Bully?
Bully,
And
yeah.
you played as like a white bully in a school, and you're like, oh shit, you know what? That's a good point. So
Right.
like in my head, I'm like, right, I've got to see what this is, because at the end of the day, and this is what I truly believe as well. Games are an art form. It's an art. It's an expression, right? I gotta hear. I gotta take it in, see what it is, and have my opinion on it. Because to at least form something, right? I can't, see a trailer of a film and be like, oh, that's. I mean, like most of the time, actually, to be honest with you, that's a terrible example, because I've seen trailers for films and I'm like, I'm never watching that. But I do feel like there is a sense of like, if I really want to form an opinion on something, I have to experience it. I have to do it, right? Like, for example, I can't sit here and talk to you about Dustborn, for example,
Mhm.
because I haven't played it,
Right.
right? And I haven't experienced it. So I can't tell you like how woke it is or whatever it is or what. I mean, even, and I hate that word, man. But
Me
like,
too. I hate that word too.
it's so stupid. Like, but the thing is like, I can't have a valid conversation with you if we haven't played it, right? Maybe when we play it, we could talk about it differently. And I think like that's the thing. It's like I feel like there is that disconnect of like, no, I'm not even going to play it. I'm gonna see this meme on it, or this tweet on it, or this video on it, and be like, cool, that's my decision on it. I don't want to give it a try.
Right. it becomes its own cultural product too, like that. Your opinion has like its own cultural weight. That this is what I think has been lost mostly, and you're talking about
Mm,
film and TV, and I'm positive it's true there too, but it's definitely true in games. Is like just a sense of market neutrality. Like, okay, you see something on a state of play presentation cross your screen, not for you. Maybe you have a passing comment that looks fucking stupid, whatever, and then you move on, with your life. But what it seems like, and I see that happens a million times a day. I see a commercial for a TV show.
yeah,
There's a film trailer I don't care about, and
yeah,
you have an internal comment, or maybe you say something with the person next to you, and then you move on with your life.
yeah,
That's what's been lost, is the idea that, okay, so Tales of Kenzera Zao or Dustborn or whatever exists,
yeah.
and like that in and of itself seems to be a
A problem.
rallying cry for people. But I'm like, dude, the worst thing you could actually do to this game is to ignore it, like
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you just don't. You could beat the piss out of it. You're probably hurting it. That's true. But to me, I'm like, why even spend your time on that?
Why even
Yeah.
like get into that, man? Like, yeah, it's just not. It's just not necessary. It's. I totally agree. Totally agree. With regards to like, it's just it's become this. It's almost become weaponized. But look, we could sit here and talk about it for a while. But it has been a very funny experience again, as I said, like being on the other end of it. And as I say, like I remember entering into this space or into this whole debacle, thinking like, I just want to understand your point of view. I want to know why you feel that way. And every time that I have kind of questioned or gone into conversation about it, 9 times out of 10, it kind of falls into the feeling that, yeah, you either we come to an agreement of the fact that like, okay, actually, maybe what you've maybe what you've thought of what you've heard isn't necessarily true, or you're doing it because it's this is your identity, this is who you are, this is what you you know where your stance is, and you don't want to see anything else.
Right. And that to me is grifting. That
Yeah,
like that word is thrown around a lot, but if like you're trying to
right,
stop others from neutrally enjoying something that's not even for you, I just find that strange. A game I said that about last year was, or it was 2 years ago, maybe at this point, was that game Forspoken from Square.
right, okay,
And I
yeah,
actually went and played it,
right,
and I beat it, and I was like, yeah, it's not great, but not. I'm like, I'm a 40-year-old man.
yeah,
I feel like this is maybe for teen girls or something. Like
yeah. I
I
think
think like they're like the writing is so cringy, and I'm like, yeah, it's not great, guys. Like it's not great, but I'm not sure that I'm even supposed to be playing this game.
so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So look. So I'm just gonna actually, because I've played Forspoken as well,
Mm,
right? And actually, this is actually a good one, because I think that was one of the ones as well that was like mentioned as like, oh, it's like or whatever. Anyway, I agree with you. I actually, playing it, I was like, okay, cool. It's a game. It functions. It does its thing. It's really sparkly.
yeah,
That's
it's
really
fun.
nice. That's really
It's
cool. It's
fun.
great. It's good
Yeah,
fun. The writing was definitely not on point, and you know what I mean. It's like the storytelling wasn't there. I didn't feel like it just felt like a weak story. Now, again, the thing is, right? And I remember again, I've had this conversation with people before where I've said, yeah, I just didn't really like the story. And then someone else would turn around to me and be like, oh, you just don't like it because it's a female lead. And I'm like, huh? Like, no,
right.
I didn't say that. I just didn't vibe with the story. The story wasn't like, the writing was a bit weak. And so you've got that other perspective, right? But then you've also got the perspective of saying like, no, I played it and I gave it a chance and it's good. And it's like, oh yeah, that's because you're a DEI like agent. And you're like,
Right, right.
hang on, man. Like, I'm just trying to talk about the game in a critical way. And so yeah, Forspoken is a great example, like
Mhm.
in regards to like the fact that even having that middle ground there, people are going to say you're one thing or the other.
Yeah, yeah, you can't win. And yeah, you realized it too. What's so funny is that there's a Venn diagram now with you and even some of the people criticizing your game that would be
Yeah.
accused of saying like, "Oh, you don't like it because it's a woman." Meanwhile, they love The Last of Us or they love Star Wars or they love
Right.
things. And so it's obviously not true. It's so funny. We find ourselves with bedfellows with like, people that we wouldn't associate with sometimes. It's funny you say that because I
It
think a
is.
lot of people would describe their situation exactly the same, even though they
It's,
also
it's
don't feel that way.
but this is it. It's that thing of like, again, it's everyone, you've got to take a stance.
Mhm.
You've got to believe in something. And it gets to a point as well, I feel, where you end up you and I could feel it for myself of being like, subject to one form of like idea of like, oh no, you're this, you're this, you're this. Again, that whole idea of being told you're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure. Even
Mm.
though I'm seeing the facts, you begin believing it. And so we end up getting to this point where you are hearing all this stuff of like, yeah, you're a leftist, you're this, you're that, you're whatever. And you're like, well, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. Maybe I am. And you end up now you're in a fight. And
Right.
it's like, you're almost having to like remove and kind of be rational and be like, again, let's just have this conversation as human beings without name calling, without, you know, the stupid things that you would sling in a playground. Like, who are you doing that for? Are you doing that to hurt my feelings, or are you doing that for your friends? Because if you're doing that for your friends, that's really sad. If you're doing it trying to hurt my feelings, that's also really sad.
Mm.
So let's just really just like kind of remove that and actually have a discussion. But it seems like lots of people are incapable of doing that, man.
They
Like
are,
it's
yeah, they are.
yeah,
It's funny because I've just kind of accepted over time that especially because we do very long, this will not be one of those podcasts, but we do very long form podcasts. Sacred Symbols is usually
right.
4 or 5 hours a week. And it allows us to just explore whatever we want for as long as we want to. And I think that people just they're not interested. A lot of people are not interested in taking the time or dedicating the time to doing that. It's easier to have, preconceived notions, to divide, and to never check yourself, which again
Mm,
is a real sign of Tails and Gonzera to me. It was just, again, not checking anything other than what I thought was true, just based
yeah.
on what I read. I'm reminded of that constantly. I tell the audience that all the time when we report news. I always go back to the press release or the original primary source, because I'm like, things get distorted all the time. And people will be like, why aren't you reporting on this? And I'm like, because that never actually was said. I don't know where that game of telephone began, but I went back and read the source. And so you have to
Right.
kind of do that with yourself too. Check your own presuppositions. And I hope
And
people
I
do
think,
that with this.
and this is it. And I just hope people just do that in general, man. Like I think like that's the thing. Like I think people, it's that whole thing of you got to just kind of just check yourself, just look at yourself for a bit, and kind of look yourself in the mirror and think like, okay, am I happy? Am I happy with this? Is this the stance? Is this the right thing to kind of to go with? If it is, and you're kind of confident with it, cool. As you say, like come in with that kind of like be very thorough with essentially where you're coming from and be very clear on it. Know every kind of nook and cranny of where someone's might come at you for it. But I also think you got to be open to that. You got to be open to the
Mm,
idea that someone can call you out on stuff and be cool with it.
right.
Rather than necessarily take offense to it. Yeah, it's yeah,
You got to be prepared. Like I also feel like you do unto others. And, I was funny. Me and my wife were talking about this lately or recently, where I was like, people are so mean to each other online, specifically about people's looks. And I'm like,
right,
I never do that. Sometimes you see something, you're like, oh my God. Like, but you never say anything, and I'm not a beautiful person by any stretch of the imagination, because you don't want to open yourself up to that ridicule. You put out the
right.
energy that you want back. It's that simple, like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why people can't check themselves on that, but they can't. I, I'm going to let you go because I've had you for a long time. I don't want to keep you for much longer, but
It's totally cool, man. No, I'm totally cool with this, man. It's good. I've got like another 15, so
oh,
it's all
okay,
good.
great. I wanted to they were just these are kind of unrelated, but I read a few other things that you had said, and I thought one of them was really poignant and beautiful, and the other I thought was really interesting, and I want to ask you about it.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the first one was from NPR, and you were talking about grief,
Mm,
and you said this quote: "Grief isn't always sad." Because they were asking you about kind of your more jovial nature. You're
yeah,
laughing, you're smiling, which is like dissonant, right, with the idea of grief as we understand it, maybe generally. And you say, and it's one of those ones where as long as you accept the fact that the grief isn't going to go away, you just have to almost accept that it's there. You get comfortable with it, and you could find almost this sort of relief in it, as well as the anger, as well as the happiness, and use that as a fuel source to keep
mm,
pushing you forward. There's a beauty in this idea of an end, that the lie that you live, or the life that you live, or that you kind of work up to, that you have, there's so much beauty there. And grief really, truly is a celebration of life. That's what grief is. I thought that
mm.
was pretty poignant. Uh,
Thank you.
just
Yeah,
wanted to
and
say
it,
that because, like, I know that, and we've talked a lot about it, but I know a lot of it is about your own grief, and I feel for you, human to human, because I sense that, and I asked you a little bit about this earlier, but it's something that I'm really going to walk away from, I think, in meeting you, is there's there's a sadness and an unfairness in that something so deep and personal to you was distorted. And
yeah,
I think that sucks because to tell, you're an actor, right? And you play
Mhm.
other people's roles and people write these roles and stuff, but this is you
Yeah.
and your experience, and it's you actually letting your guard down and not playing a role really, but
Mhm.
rather playing something that's much more true to form. And I just want to say that, I'm sorry about that. I think that that sucks. And I've written a few games, nothing of this extent or whatever, and it hurts me when people say like the writing sucks or like who
Right.
cares about this or whatever, and like I can only and it's like fake sci-fi, right? Like I can only
Right.
imagine how that feels for you because you would wanted to tell a story and people had bastardized it, and I just want to say I'm sorry. I think that that's really
No,
unfortunate.
thank you, man. Like but yeah, and it's you know what's funny is like the first thing that I want to come out with or say is, yeah, well, that's what it is, man. It's the world, and it's like, oh man, but
Mm,
I don't want to kind of accept that, but at the same time, it's like, look, I take it, I do take it, and I think like there is, as you say, like there is like that beauty and that kind of that quote, and I still even listening to you say it back to me and knowing like, yeah, that is my opinion on it, and that is my thoughts on grief. But after again, that was during the time when I was talking about the game and trying to figure out like, trying to essentially say what the experience was of the game and what it is. Now I know that story is different today. And like,
mm.
even if I do say it and I say like there is, and that's still my opinion, and that's still where this game came from, there is so much now on top of that, which is just like, oh man, but it ain't about that, but it has to be. So yeah, I thank you though. I take that.
Yeah,
I do
just human
take
to
that.
human, and then
Thank you.
um you said this too. I think it was in the NPR interview as well about Metroidvanias, and I want to set this up to say that because I know you have to go and I don't want to keep you, but
Nah, so cool, so cool,
no,
man.
no, no. Is that I'd love to have you back in the future to specifically talk about like we've talked about
Okay.
all the sad stuff but like I'd love to talk to you about Metroidvanias.
Right.
That one of my favorite genres, Symphony of the Night, was I like Super Metroid, but Symphony of the Night was really a game changing game for me,
Hmm.
and I try to play as many of them as I can. Although, like you said earlier, they are it's very saturated right now with them. But
Hmm.
you said this quote, and I thought this was kind of brilliant. Specifically, the Metroidvania genre, in my eyes, it encapsulates the idea of grief, the journey of it. You're thrown into a world that you have no idea about. Over time, you get comfortable with it, gives you the tools to get through it. That's grief, right? The first time you feel angry during the process, when the beat kind of turns its head again, you know how to deal with it. That's because it provided that tool. End quote. I'd love to talk to you about the mechanics
Yeah.
of Metroidvanias. I'd love to talk to you about if you're going to make a sequel to the game. I mean, there's so many more things to ask you about, and I'd love to wax about Metroidvanias because I think that they're just such a special
They're
genre.
a really
So
cool genre.
so
Yeah,
I'd love
man.
to have. I hope I can. Maybe I'll reach out to you later this year or early next year or something.
For
I know you're
sure.
very busy, and maybe we can talk about
For
that because
sure.
I'd love to focus
Yeah,
on that with
because
someone who made one.
and look, and this is the thing. Like I find the medium of games and interactive storytelling really compelling because there is so much more you can do rather than a film. Like I can actually take you through an experience,
Mhm.
like that element of grief through the genre or through the world of what it is, right? And there is so much to play with in that space, like for me, like what I'm obsessed with at the moment, or kind of like playing in my head, is this idea of identity. Like, who are you? What does that mean?
Right.
What's a great genre to kind of explore that into an RPG? Okay, what kind of mechanics can we explore within the RPG that kind of really puts that to question? What kind of tensions can we pull into that? Or, for example, the idea of I'd had this other idea for a game which I thought could be really cool, which is essentially about um parenthood, right? And I don't know, do you have
I don't
kids?
have any kids, no.
Right. Okay. So I've got a young daughter, and there is this routine that we are constantly, doing, right? It's like you wake up at a certain time, you feed her at this time, and you rinse and repeat, and you do the same thing again. It's a bit like a roguelike. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, what exploring the relationship of, be either parent child, or being again, that kind of dynamic there, like in a roguelike setting, but is kind of, again, it's not about like, oh, it's about being a mother or being a father. No, you put it in a really cool sort of crazy sci-fi world, but at its core, that's what it's about. And this is, that's that's what I love about games, is that you can really do that and have people experience and explore that and feel that, rather than necessarily me telling you this story. So even like with Zao and the idea of it being, it was a story about grief, about this young boy grieving, about, the journey of it and loss, and about, essentially that, all the complexities of it. That's what's so great about Metroidvanias, because they are kind of a bit like an open world. You're kind of thrown into this world that you have no idea about, and it's told, have at it. But the longer you spend time in it, the more kind of comfortable you get with it, the more, of an idea of like, oh, cool, I'm going to come back to this thing here because it screwed me up over beforehand. But I know that if I come back to it later on, I might get something that will help me. And it's like, that's what grief is. It's like the amount of times, I've said to people who have either experienced loss and kind of said to them, like, it's a journey. It isn't just a thing that you accept. Like, you will never accept it. Like, even today, to this day, like I feel like I'm still finding shades and colors of what my father meant to me. Even like, even I said the birth of my daughter, it was like almost came back again of me being a father. And it's like, that's the complexities of it, and the magical madness of it. And that's why I love Metroidvanias, because there is this magical madness about it. You are literally throwing someone in there naked, and as they kind of, get, stronger. I mean, I know they do this in Metroid where they like almost give you all the powers and then they take and strip you away of it. Like, it's a classic thing, right? It's like, that's the thing. Like, you feel immortal before this event happens. Suddenly it hits you and you realize how raw you are. And it's like, yeah, and that's why I love games, man. I think games, there's something about video games and that interactive medium of being able to evoke that is really exciting and cool to dabble and dive deeper into.
Yeah, I'd love to pick your brain more about that, and I will definitely reach out in the future, because I've never heard the genre really discussed from an emotional point of view, and like the vacancy, the loneliness, the uncertainty, the fear. It's good stuff, man. I loved reading.
Yeah. Like, even like, even like when we came to approaching like the level design of it all, like we were very much of the mentality of like, okay, we don't want to do the classic like lava level, water level, snow. We were like, no, let's look at like vibes and feelings of anxiety or like anger. So like, the Highlands, which is like the area that you kind of go on with all the kind of jumping up to the air with a storm. That's all based on anxiety. It's all based on the fear of like, oh, what do I do now? How do I do this? How am I going to be this? What am I going to do that? And we were thinking, yeah, it's a climb. Sometimes you might fall, but like it's a build up to something. It's a storm, and that's how we wanted to approach the design of these levels and the design of the mechanics in the game. It's all based on emotions, on the journey of it, the complexities of it. Because isn't that more exciting to kind of play from? You know what I mean? So yeah,
definitely. I love that. I hope that you're in like the way you speak about games, I hope is very influential to the actors and the people in film and TV around you about their own power. I think slowly Hollywood has learned and discovered it, but you're still on the forefront, I think, of yeah, it's good stuff. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you. And thank you for taking the time, being very generous with your time, and being very honest and open. I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you, man. Like I appreciate the space to kind of be open and talking about this stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, I hope to have you back soon. I appreciate you again, and I appreciate all of you guys out there for listening. Hope you enjoyed it or watching if you're watching on YouTube. More Sacred Symbols coming. You know it. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.